Controlling our strong emotions like anger, as well as the urges that our body has. On a spiritual path, we speak so frequently about overcoming, whether it's emotions, whether it's different urges, and the question came up, well, how do you do that? The first piece of this is, the way you don't do it is suppression. Nothing goes away just by ignoring it. If you've ever played hide and seek with a very young child, what you know is that it's actually very, very cute. What they do is they will sit in the middle of the room and close their eyes, because if they can't see you, you can't see them. It's this concept that somehow if I just close my eyes, it's all gonna go away. And unfortunately, that's not the case with emotions. It's not the case with strong urges. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to swing so far on the pendulum as the Western world from which so many of us have come. In the West, particularly in the academic, psychological aspect of the West, it's all about processing. And so if you went into a therapist or a psychologist and you spoke about having anger issues, or you spoke about having very, very strong urges or desires, you could be in therapy for the next 10 years, 20 years. But we also don't swing the whole other end of the pendulum. Just because you have anger issues, or just because you have strong urges, whether it's an urge for chocolate cake, whether it's an urge for a beer, whether it's an urge for a cigarette, whether it's an urge for sex with someone who's not your partner, whatever it is, all of these aspects that are connected to the physical body, they don't require the decades of going back and rehashing and rehashing and rehashing. And I say this because this is the world that I came from. What that can do is it brings us insight. So we glean observations of, oh, here's why I'm angry, or oh, here's why I have such strong desires or such strong urges. But what that form of therapy, sadly, is not so able to give us is a way out of it. And in most cases, this isn't true all the time, but in most cases, insight in and of itself is not a cure. There are many, many people who could write books on their own alcoholism, books on their own anger, books on their own issues, but who are still struggling with them. So simply having the insight also isn't the answer. Really what I have found is it's a combination. There has to be some level of insight. That's what we're put on earth to do. This is what Gyan Yoga is. When we go in search of wisdom. But it's a wisdom that's deeper than just, oh, my mother did this, or my father did that, or, you know, when I was a kid, this and that happened. It's a deep wisdom of who we are. And with that wisdom comes the awareness that, yes, at the deepest, highest level, what we are is divine. What we are is consciousness. What we are is spirit. What we are is love. That's at the highest level, and it's something we talk about frequently. And yet, that consciousness, that love, that spirit, that divinity is here in a human form. And I've got very, very strong faith in God. And part of that strong faith in God is that He wouldn't give us something just for the purpose of us learning how to ignore it. So if what we've been given is a body, I don't believe we've been given it just so that we can learn not to pay any attention to it. If what we've been given are emotions, sadness, anger, pain, I don't believe we've been given them either just so that we can learn how to pretend that they're not there. Everything we've been given is a tool to our own awakening, a tool to our own unfolding, a tool to our own enlightenment. And in this case, well, what happens with anger, as well as what happens as we fulfill, respond to, give into, you could say, all of the urges, is that we literally lay patterns. In Indian culture, we speak about what's called sanskaras. In the West, we talk about neurological patterns, or in science, we would call them neural circuits. And really all it's saying is that what you do today, you're more likely to do tomorrow. That if I've got this little metal plate and I take my glass of water and I pour the glass of water over the plate, it's gonna come down pretty evenly. But if I take my fingernail or a key or something and I over and over and over again start to go in one spot, and then I pour the water, what's gonna happen? Where's it gonna go? Any ideas? Yeah, exactly. In the spot that I've, in the groove that I've created. And then when the water goes there, what does it do? It makes it deeper. Yeah. So it becomes this vicious cycle. Every time you get angry, and I don't mean every time that just the emotion comes to you, but I mean every time you act on it, you're deepening the groove and making yourself more likely to act on anger in the future. Every time you give in to the urge that says, I just need a couple of drinks, I just need a cigarette, oh, it's not so bad, everybody does it, whatever the it may be. Every time you give in to that urge, you're increasing the likelihood that next time you'll give into it. And what's important about that is every time that we give in, what most of us tend to tell ourselves is, just one more time. This is the last time. From tomorrow morning, from Monday, from January 1st, from my birthday, whatever auspicious date we tend to choose, then I won't do it anymore. Just one more time. What that one time has done is increased, not decreased, the likelihood that you'll do it again. And so the solution becomes a balance of awareness, insight, and discipline. We are aware of what's happening because if you're not aware of it, you have no chance. There's anger. Puja Swamiji talks about how as your spiritual practice strengthens, you can start literally seeing anger as though it were coming from across the room. Before we begin, we find ourselves already having slapped someone, having hit someone, having punched a hole through a wall, having said something we didn't want to say. And it's only in the aftermath that we wonder, what happened? But as you start the practice, you get more and more clarity. And what that clarity does, that awareness does, the mindfulness does, is it doesn't prevent anger. Mindfulness is not an antidote to emotion. Mindfulness does not numb you or dull you. What it is an antidote to being the slave of emotion. And those are two very different things, but it's a very important distinction. We don't become rocks. But rather than finding ourselves in the aftermath of something, we find ourselves in the pre-math of something, a new word I just invented, but we see it coming. I'm starting to feel anger. And long before we've hit, we've screamed, we've kicked, we've said something, long before that, we're able to witness it. And the incredible thing, whether it's emotions or whether it's urges, is they have a very short half-life. They feel very, very strong in the moment. They come like this wave, literally. And if we don't act on them, there's that moment of, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. If I don't yell or scream or hit or drink or eat or smoke or do whatever my thing is, I'm gonna explode. But miraculously, you don't. Nobody's ever actually exploded from willpower. And what happens is it peaks, and there's that very, very difficult moment of, and if you can just sit through it and just breathe through it, your breath is your best ally. Low and slowly. Because all of our urges, whether it's anger, whether it's passion for a physical being, whether it's passion to go out and get drunk, whatever it is, they increase our heart rate. Our heart rate starts to increase, our blood pressure rises a little, our palms start to sweat. We get this tunnel vision. And it's that tunnel vision that makes us feel like if I don't, I'm going to die. This anger is going to consume me. This lust is going to consume me. This urge is going to consume me. And if you can change your breathing pattern, because emotions and the breath are actually a two-way street. The emotion causes the breath rate to increase, the heart rate to increase. But by changing our breath, we actually can change the emotion as well. So it moves in both directions. We can use our breath to change what's going on in our mind. And the other piece is simply awareness. Anger. You've come back so soon. But you just visited yesterday. Like we spent the whole afternoon together. Really? You had to come back so soon? And a little bit of humor is wonderful. It's a great ally. Because the reason that we lose is we take these things so seriously. But I was angry. Okay. So you were angry. But I needed it. Okay. You didn't need it. There's just this, what Indian culture would call sanskaras, what we would call a neuronal network. There's a pattern. It's electrical, it's chemical, it's happening in your brain. The pattern happened. Didn't render you any less of a human being. So if we can bring a little humor into it, actually, it's wonderful. Anger. Lust. It's never enough, is it? Addiction. What am I trying to numb? How interesting that Inhaling smoke is something that I feel the urge to do. How interesting that drinking distilled alcohol that tastes miserable and is going to give me a horrible headache tomorrow and that I'll probably vomit up in the next few hours. How interesting that I have such an urge to partake of it. What am I trying to numb? Chocolate cake. You taste so good on the first bite, and yet I never stop with a bite. I never stop even with one piece. I eat long after I taste the food. What am I numbing? And that's where the insight comes in. In that moment. It's there. Okay, it's right up. It's in front of you. Look at it. Try to really see the emotion, see the urge. What's it trying to tell you? What are we running from in our lives that our addictions help us ignore? What are we so afraid of? Because the last point I want to mention is anger. Anger is actually what we call a secondary emotion. It's not a primal emotion. The primal emotion that spurs anger is fear. We get angry when we are afraid. And this is why people, men and women, but in many cases even more men, who are told not to be afraid, get more angry. With women, there's a little bit more of a cultural acceptance to being afraid. And so we have to resort to anger a little bit less. Not 100% by any means. But remember when you get angry that the question is, on a deep level, what am I afraid of? What is it that that person just did or said that made me so angry? And once you identify that, the second question is, and what am I afraid of? If I didn't run from this situation into anger, if I didn't punch through a hole in the wall, if I didn't slap someone or throw a temper tantrum, and I just had to sit with that fear, what would that mean? And that's where the insight gets really interesting. And then every time it comes, we at least know how to address it. You know what it's from. It's like if you've got an allergy to something, and you don't know what it's to, but you know that you break out in hives, or that you stop breathing, or that something is itching. Well, you can't cure it until you know actually what it is that you're allergic to. First, you've got to identify it. And with anger, it's very easy to say, oh, well, I'm angry when my kids don't clean up their room. Really? I mean, really, a messy room makes us so angry that we cannot control the limbs of our body? No. What makes us angry about it is, I've told them 10 times, they don't listen. What that means is, my kids don't respect me. And if my kids don't respect me, then I'm a failure as a parent. And that's really scary. So it's not the clothes on the floor that have made me angry. It's the concept of being a failure as a parent that's very scary. And once we know that, then it's much easier to address the situation. So behind every anger is a bit of fear. And if we can look at that, then A, it teaches us a lot more about who we are and makes us free of it. And ultimately that's the goal. Our own freedom. Then we have the ability to walk whatever path we want, and there certainly may be times that we choose to express anger as parents or as teachers to get behavior modification. But at least we're not the slave of it. We haven't lost ourselves. We've got the